Welcome everyone. My name is Joshua Bujeya and I will be your professor for the Fundamentals of Programming course. I have a bachelor's degree in business and computing and a master's in computing. For the past years, I have been employed as a senior lecturer, delivering units related to software development. Previously, I was a software developer for a company which produces software related to network security. During this course, we will be introducing the C++ programming language, and we will be going through the installation and setup of our development environment so that we can start producing our very own applications. C++ is a programming language developed by Bjarne Stroustrup in 1979. It is a general-purpose object-oriented programming language, meaning that C++ is a language which can be used to develop a wide range of applications, and being object-oriented, it supports all the latest features which allows us to develop complex applications. Even if it was developed in 1979, C++ is still today one of the most widely used languages in system and software development, game programming, and wherever high performance is required. Why C++? Because C++ is a very versatile language and can be used in many domains, such as gaming, finance, and embedded systems. It is a very high-performant language with performance very close to hardware and fast execution times. Knowing C++ allows you to subsequently transfer that knowledge to other programming languages. And today, C++ is one of the most sought-after programming language where developers are highly requested by the industry. C++ is an object-oriented programming. This is a method of developing applications through the use of classes, inheritance, polymorphism, and encapsulation, which allows us to develop complex applications. It has direct interaction with hardware and memory management, and it's one of the reasons why C++ is a high-performant language. It has a very strong standards library, which provides us with the data structures and the algorithms which are frequently used in development of applications, and has over the years acquired a rich library support with libraries to carry out tasks such as networking, file handling, and other activities which programmers are required to develop in their applications from time to time. C++, we can find its product in many areas. For example, Unity, Unreal Engine, and DirectX, where game development is considered. Those are all products which make use of C++. Operating systems, drivers, and embedded systems also make use of C++. Finance systems, high-frequency trading applications, and scientific applications such as simulations and mathematical models and real-time systems are all use cases where C++ is in use today. Even though there have been a number of languages developed after C++, C++ is still one of the most popular because it is very efficient and it allows us to have fine control over our system resources. It is backwards compatible. We will see that C++ is being developed even up to this year, but it's still compatible with the previous versions. It is cross-platform, meaning that we can develop the application once and it is supported on various operating systems like Windows, Mac, and Linux. And over the years, many applications and systems have been built using C++, which means that there is a legacy code base which needs to be maintained and improved over the years. For example, when comparing C++ to Python, we see that C++ has a very faster execution time, but the syntax can sometimes be a bit more complex when compared to Python. When compared to Java, C++ allows us to have more control over our system resources, but Java has the advantage of being more portable, of being able to run on more systems. When compared to C Sharp, C++ is a lower level and more powerful language which can be used for system programming. When writing our code in C++, this code needs to be converted into a language which the computer can understand. C++ is a high-level language, meaning that its syntax is very close to English language. Hence, computers cannot understand that syntax, and the code we develop needs to be converted into a language which the computer can understand. This conversion is taken care of by a tool called the compiler. The compiler takes our code as the input, it checks our code for any possible errors, and then converts the code into an executable which can be run on our machines. In order to develop applications, we will be using a software called the Integrated Development Environment, or IDE for short. This software is designed to make it easier for us to develop, build, and test our applications. A typical IDE will include a way to load and save our coding, our projects, a code editor with line numbers, with syntax highlighting, so that when we enter a command, the command takes a different color. It has help built in. It will automatically complete the names of our commands as we are typing them in, and it will also automatically format our code as we are typing it. The IDE will also allow us to compile and to run our applications, and the IDE also has a tool called the debugger, which allows us to find and fix errors within our code. There are a number of integrated development environments which can be used during the development of C++. For example, on Windows, you can use CLion or Visual Studio. On Linux, you can use CLion or NetBeans. On macOS, you can use CLion or Xcode. In reality, it doesn't matter which IDE you select. In the case of this course, I will be demonstrating the code through the use of CLion, since it is an IDE which can be installed on all the operating systems. So even if you are running Windows, Mac or Linux, all of you can make use of CLion and follow exactly what I will be showing during this course. CLion can be downloaded from the URL shown on this slide. Whilst CLion is not free, JetBrains, the company behind CLion, they do offer a free license to students. Therefore, I encourage you that when you download the application, you register using your educational email address, and that will be used by JetBrains to give you a free student license. We will be now going through the process of setting up CLion on our computer. Once you have downloaded Selenium from JetBrains.com, please proceed to install it on your computer. When you run Selenium for the first time, it will ask you whether you want to start a free trial or you want to sign in with your JetBrains account. I suggest that you create a JetBrains account so that then you can use that account to apply for the free student license. Once you have that part sorted, you can start Selenium and you will see a screen similar to this one, which will allow us to create our project. So we will click on the new project button, which will proceed to the new project screen. On the left-hand side, we can see a column with the different types of projects that we can create. In our case, since we will be dealing with C++, we will be always choosing C++ executable. Here, we will give Selenium the location of where we want to save our project. In my case, I want to save these projects on my desktop so that I have easy access to them, and I will give a meaningful name to the folder. I remove the word untitled and I give the name of the project my first project. Underneath, there is this language standard option, which presents us with a number of different C++ standards, which we can choose from. C++ is updated every 3 years in order to include new features and developments related to programming. And these are the different versions which are available to us. In our case, we will be using C++ 20. This is because C++ 20 represents a version of C++ which is stable, which has been tested for quite some time, and which the compilers support without any issues. C++ 23 is the latest version, which was released a few months ago, and C++ 26 is a beta version, which will be released as stable in 2026. So in our case, we will be choosing C++ 20. If the IDE you are using does not allow you to use C++ 20, C++ 17 is also adequate for our needs as well. So I will go ahead, select C++ 20 and click on Create. When I click on Create, I am now presented with the main Selenium screen. On the left-hand side, I am presented with a view of my folder. So this is my first project, the folder created on my desktop. Inside the folder, there is another folder called CMake build debug. There is a file called cmakelists.txt, and there is another file called main.c++. It is important that we never rename or delete these files, as these are required in order for our code to run. We will be developing the code inside the main.cpp file. That is where our code will live. And I'm going to double click on it to make sure that in the main window, I am now seeing main.cpp. If in your case the file is not named main.cpp, but it has a different name, it means that on the previous screen, the choice was not C++ executable, but was a different choice. So in that case, it's important to create a new project and make sure that you select C++ executable so that you have this main.cpp file. Selenium conveniently gives us a sample application, and in order to make sure that our IDE is working as intended, we will try to run this application as it is. So in order to run the application, we will click on Display button at the top of our window, and as soon as we click this button, you will see some text scrolling up at the bottom of the screen. At the beginning, that will be the compiler checking our code, and then there will be our application running, and there will be the output of our application. So let's press the run button. And here is the output of our application, where I can see hello world, which is the text we have on this line over here. If we can see hello world, it means that our IDE has been installed and set up successfully. It is very probable that on your computers, if you have installed Selenium for the first time and you have run your first application, that a window will pop up for you with options related to the compiler. In that case, I invite you to press on OK, because the defaults options presented to us for the compiler are adequate. So on that window, we can press OK. That window should only appear on the first time that you click the run button and should not appear on any subsequent runs. So once we run our application, we can see the hello world text, which is the text which we have over here. So let's start to go through this sample code provided by Selenium for us. The first line is hash include IOStream. So in our application, we are including a library called IOStream. IOStream stands for Input Output Stream, and it is this library that allows us to use this std cout command. Without IOStream, I cannot use the std cout command. That's why it is required over line number 1. We always start our C++ applications with any libraries that we need to include at the very top. Then, on line 3, we have this main function. We have the main function, which starts with this curly bracket on line 3 and ends with the other curly bracket on line 6. Our code will live inside this main function. That is the code that will be run by our application. The main function is preceded by the word int. Int represents an integer, so this means that the main function will be returning an integer. It is important that all of our applications have a main function. This is because the main function is the entry point to our application. Operating systems have been developed to look for the main function when running our applications. So if our line is 100 lines, if our code is 100 lines, or if our code is 1000 lines, the operating system knows from where to start running our application by going inside the main function. On line 4, we are using the std cout command in order to display the sentence hello world. The cout command is the command that we use to display text on our monitor. So we do std : cout, put the sentence that we need, and in this case we also have the std endl command. The stdl command stands for end line, and in this case, it is adding a blank line after hello world. That's why you can see here this blank line. Hence, if I had to remove the stdl from that line and run the code again, we now see that the blank line previously visible is now gone. Let me undo the changes so that it is back to how the sample was originally. Hence, we were saying that cout is the function we use in order to display text on the screen, and del is used to signify that the line has ended and that we should move on to the next line. All commands in C++ are terminated with a semicolon. It's very important. That's how the compiler knows that this command has ended. On line number 5, we have return 0. Since the main is preceded by the word int, which signifies an integer, it is expected that the main will return a number. In this case, main is returning 0. This return is given to the operating system to signify that our application has terminated successfully. It is from that 0 that the operating system knows that the application has closed, has terminated, and that it has terminated in a correct way. If we have a mistake in our code and the application crashes, the return will not be at 0, and from that number, the operating system will realize that the application has indeed crashed and not closed successfully. Again, the return 0 is concluded using a semicolon. Let's say we want to add another line in our application. So we want to show the words, today is a sunny day. So we have to use the std cout command, and here we type the sentence that we want to show on our monitor. Today is a sunny day. And we finish with std and l. You notice that as soon as I start typing a command, Selenium will provide me with the possible options available for me to continue that command. That is our autocomplete feature. It will come in handy later on, especially when we have variables with long names, and it will save us time by not having to write the name of the variable every time. If we try to run this application, we will now see that we have 2 lines of text, hello world, and underneath it, today is a sunny day. If I had to remove this std and l from the first line and run my application again, what will happen is that both lines will be printed on the same line. If that is not what we want, if we want that after hello world we start a new line, we have to include the std and l command. Now, each line is shown separately. Up until now, we have been quite lucky in the sense that whenever we went to run our application, we had no mistakes in our code, and the compiler could compile our code and run our application. What happens if we have a mistake in our code? Let's introduce some mistake in this code. Let's say I forget to put my semicolons. Okay. Immediately, Selenium will realize that something is wrong and will tell me that there are 3 errors. It will also show me that squiggly red line on each command, and here on the side is also showing me that there's an error. If I hover my mouse on that squiggly line, it is telling me that it is expecting a semicolon. So the compiler is being helpful, not only telling me that there is a mistake, but also trying to help me on how to solve that mistake. So I put in the semicolon over there, and now immediately that error is gone, and now I only have 2 errors left. If I try to compile now, the application will not run. Instead, I will get a notification that the build has failed, so the compiler cannot build our application, and I will get the reasons why this didn't happen. And the first reason is there, expected semicolon on line 5, and expected semicolon on line 6. So until I fix my mistakes, my application cannot run. Once I solve all the issues in my code, I can then run my application. What happens if we forget to include the IOStream library? As soon as I remove the reference to IOStream, you will realize that these lines, these have changed color, and that now I have 4 errors. The errors are telling me that std is not a recognized command. Okay? std is not a recognized command. It is not realizing by itself that I need to include the IOStream. Okay? So now the error message is not as helpful as it was before. It is up to me as the developer to realize that I have forgotten to include the IOStream library. As soon as I include the IOStream library, my errors will go away and I can run my application. If we forget to include our main, we will have quite a number of errors. And as you can see, the errors again are not very helpful. None of the errors are telling me that the main function is missing in this case. So again, it is up to me as the developer to realize that this code will not run and that the error is from the fact that I have no main function in my code. If by mistake I include 2 main functions in the code, okay, that is also not possible. That is also a mistake because there can only be one main function. You will see that the second one has the squiggly red lines, and the error will tell me that the main function has already been defined or declared. The solution to that is to remove the duplicate main function. It is also important to always leave the main function named as it is. We cannot rename the main function. If by mistake I rename the main function and I try to run my code, the build will fail, and this time it has failed because there is no reference to the main. Okay? And again, it is up to me to realize that there is no main function and that a main function is required for our applications to run. Our code needs to be inside the main function. So between these curly brackets, that's where our code will live. If by mistake I put the code after my main function, this will not work. It will give me an error. And again, it's up to the developer to realize that we cannot have lines of code after the main function has finished. Also, it's important to note that all of our code needs to go before the return. Okay? If I put code code after the return, you will notice that Selenium has put that code in gray, and if I hover my mouse over it, it will tell me that it is unreachable code. Hence, that code will never run. In this case, the compiler will manage to compile my application will run, but this line will never be shown. Okay? Now, if you notice, I have a warning, not an error. When we have warnings, the application will compile, but there is still something wrong which requires our attention. Okay? In this case, the problem is that we have lines of code after the return, and these lines of code will never be run as part of our application because our application terminates with the return 0. If we need to show this line, we have to put it before the return. And now I can run my code. I can space my code as I want. Okay, we call that white space. It's up to us how many white space we include in our code. I can run that without any issues. Okay, the compiler will essentially strip all of the white code of the white lines in our code before compiling and running it. So the only difference it makes is to us, and it might be helpful to organize our code in a way which helps us identify what the code is doing better. Okay, so that means that if this code is part of the main function, we indent the code inside the function. We don't put all of our code like that, because if we put all of our code as a block of text, it becomes difficult to read. So we indent our code, and that way we immediately notice that these 4 lines are part of the main function. So today in this session, we went over the introduction of C++. We discussed why C++ is an important language to learn. we have downloaded, installed, and set up our development environment, and we have gone through our first application in C++, the application that is given to us as sample by CLion. And then we have modified slightly the application by adding more lines, and we have seen what happens when we have mistakes in our code. It's okay at the beginning to have quite a number of mistakes in our code. It is expected. I can assure you that with practice, you will then start having less and less errors in your code, and you will start getting comfortable with producing code of your own. Thank you for your time, and see you in the next session.